Hello and welcome to the Whole Health Cure. And I have the pleasure of working with today's guest, and we share many patients that we co-manage with chronic diseases ranging from diabetes to heart disease to osteoporosis. And seeing our patients do so well on plant-based diets has been one of the most gratifying parts of our jobs. Jenny Bilko is a registered dietitian for Emory Executive Health and Emory Lifestyle Medicine and Wellness. She graduated from University of Georgia with a bachelor's degree in dietetics. She completed her dietetic internship at University of Alabama at Birmingham, along with her master's degree in nutrition science. She's also my co-author of the cookbook Plantology, a cookbook based on the science of plant-based eating. Jenny, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so cool to hear you say our cookbook title in my bio. It's so nice to finally hear it out loud.
It's been a fun project, and I have been greatly appreciative of all that you've added with your wonderful recipes and your great tips. So, Jenny, let me start by asking, what got you passionate about plant-based eating?
Yeah, it's a funny story. I feel like it came at a perfect time when I was doing my master's program. So my mom actually got me How Not to Die by Dr. Greger, who is, you and I share as an amazing role model in the plant-based community. And that was kind of my first dip into the plant-based world. And I guess subconsciously, my mom, who was the cook in the family, followed more of a plant-based diet without me really realizing. She worked as a nurse in cardiac rehab for her career. And so she was always knowledgeable about the Mediterranean diet and just like a plant-forward diet, I guess. And so she picked up this book at Costco and was like, Jenny, I think you would really enjoy this. And I was doing my master's program at the time. So of course I was like in that mode of like research and studies and understanding nutrition in the science world. And Dr. Greger does such a great job of presenting the evidence about plant-based eating and prevention of chronic disease. And that was kind of the first time where it was so great to have a resource that put all of that information together. And I think when I was in grad school, it's a lot of like, okay, this is the nutrition therapy to manage a disease. And this was the first time where I was reading something that was like, oh, well, nutrition can be really used as a preventative resource for chronic disease. And so that was kind of like my first step. And I, of course, like started implementing some of those principles in my own life and just found it to be honestly a lot easier to think about nutrition in that way, because nutrition can get extremely complicated. And by following a plant-based diet, it kind of goes back to these like general principles of like, if you're incorporating whole, minimally processed foods that are grown out of the ground and really don't change that much, you're going to be doing a pretty good job, So it kind of oversimplified nutrition in a good way. And in conjunction with meeting you when I started working at Emory and interacting with other people who are in the plant-based community, it just kind of forwarded my love for plant-based eating even further. And also, obviously, the help that it brings for our patients that we see every day too. Plus, you get the benefits of like the environmental benefits and the cost benefits and all different types of things that just kind of perpetuate you to keep on it, I guess. So I can thank my mom for helping me pursue plant-based eating at the end of the day, but there's been a lot of people that have inspired me to kind of incorporate that into my counseling as well.
It's interesting that a lot of the inspiration for a lot of physicians advocating for plant-based diets has also happened outside of the curriculum or the actual formal training, because it's very analogous to your experience going through your master's program, very disease-oriented as opposed to prevention-oriented. And you mentioned, Jenny, this was a simple way of eating. So let's get into what plant-based eating is. So how would you define it?
Yeah, so the way that I describe plant-based eating to my patients is it's kind of an umbrella term for a lot of different ways of eating. And it's almost like an umbrella term for a continuum. So, yes, certainly we have like veganism, which is no animal products whatsoever and is completely plant-based, right? But then we also have the Mediterranean diet that has an emphasis on fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes that still incorporate some animal proteins in there, particularly fish, some poultry, and a little bit of red meat in there occasionally. And then we have everything in between. So we have like lacto-ovo-vegetarianism, we have flexitarian, we have all different types of terms. And what it comes down to is plant-based can kind of describe all of those things in one, but instead it focuses on what's incorporated into the diet versus what's excluded. And the foundations of all of those diets should be fruits and vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts and seeds, herbs and spices. So you can kind of figure out where you fall within comfortableness within that continuum, but still be under that umbrella of plant-based with the emphasis of those foundations. So it gives a little bit more of a flexibility and also a fun attitude of focusing on what to add versus what to take away, which I love as a counselor of nutrition.
Mm-hmm. And when you work with your patients, what are your goals for your patients?
Yeah, I mean it ranges in variety, right? So it's a couple of different things. So when patients come to see me, there's a variety of different concerns, right? A lot of patients are looking for prevention of chronic disease. Maybe they have a particular precursor like higher LDL cholesterol or elevated blood sugars. They may be in that pre-diabetes range. Some of them already are at the disease stage, say they have a diagnosis of diabetes, that A1C at some point is above 7.0%. Some are looking for overall wellness, like they're trying to change body fat percentage or gain muscle mass percentage. Some of them are looking in the future. They have a family history of chronic disease, although they don't have any precursors yet. They have a family history of diabetes or heart disease, and so they're thinking about nutrition in that scope. So it kind of depends on where they are in their journey, whether it's prevention, management, or reversal, and so a lot of the goals that we talk about are not only content related, so trying to get the most out of our nutrition, optimize it. So trying to get as many vitamins and minerals and antioxidants in there, but also to practically think about how to implement those things. And that's where behavior comes in. So a lot of my goals that I set with my patients are actually more behavioral related. And it could be as simple as like, developing a better meal structure or dietary structure where they're eating more frequently throughout the day, how they're balancing their meal with a multitude of different food groups, how to increase variety through, and that's where protein comes in of like, okay, how can we increase varieties of proteins to introduce higher fiber foods, that sort of thing. So it ranges the gambit between like content and behavioral goals.
Mm-hmm. And, the behavior piece, I think, is really important because there are two parts. One is knowing what to eat or the types of foods to eat. And then the second part is, well, how do I do it? A lot of people are busy. Life is stressful. And sometimes eating is not the priority for some people. What's a good starting point? How do you get people started?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I feel like I've gotten into a good cadence with patients about talking about like four main things to help them get started. And One of them is just observation. Like, I think it's really hard to make a change to your diet, whether it's content or behavioral, until you fully know what's going on in the current present. So it's helpful to take some time to observe what's going on throughout the day. And that could take place in a multitude of different ways, right? So it could be a simple food journal where you're just writing down what you're eating throughout the day. It could be a little bit more in depth, whether it's calorie tracking or point system tracking. Those aren't my favorite methods because I think what's really important in that observation is to take into account some of the qualitative data. And what I mean by that is asking about what are your hunger cues telling you throughout the day? Like, are you ever going into a meal where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so hungry? Or have you noticed if you have an energy slump in the afternoon, are you less motivated to exercise later in the day, even though that's the only time that you can do it? So those are some qualitative questions to also include into that observation. So I think that's number one. The second thing is meal structure and dietary structure. And basically what that means is like, okay, what are the timing of your meals throughout the day? Because our bodies do really well when we nourish about every 3 to 4 hours or so. And if we're not doing that, well, then our brain is going to start sending us signals to kind of overcorrect or tell us, hey, we need energy. So without that 3 to 4 hour cadence, we may be going into our next meal really, really hungry, which means that we might overeat, or it may be harder to make a healthier choice, or we're eating past fullness, right? So trying to keep to that cadence of 3 to 4 hours, we're having a meal or a snack is a really good first step. Then it's meal balance. Okay, what foods are we incorporating at each meal? Are we getting full and then staying full for those 3 to 4 hours? And that depends on the macronutrient distribution. That's where incorporating high fiber carbohydrates is really helpful, incorporating some sort of protein each time you eat, incorporating healthy fats that are satiating. So that gets into the nitty gritty of the details of, hey, what are we incorporating at each meal? And what's the goal with this meal? And then last, it's mindfulness. So thinking about, hey, are we distracted when we're eating? Are we sitting down and having a dinner and watching TV? Or are we mindlessly grabbing snacks throughout the day? Are we creating an experience with our food? Are we truly enjoying it? Are we creating a satisfaction there? So that's kind of the last step, is trying to ask even more qualitative questions on top of that to kind of get to the roots of some of our behavioral issues. Yeah.
Yeah. And how about troubleshooting, right? I imagine a lot of people have this great framework that you provided, but then they had a work dinner, they had to pick up their kids from school and didn't have time to necessarily make a meal or think about the macronutrients or be mindful when they were eating. Do you have any tips on just general approach to eating? Because clearly there are going to be days where we're off. And what should people do when they have these off days?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. I think one, it's important to know that nutrition is never going to be 100% perfect. Like, it's just never going to work out that way. And so if we set a realistic expectation of what we can achieve with our nutrition, that's already going to set us up for success. And generally what I tell people is like the 80-20% rule, 90-10 rule. It's like it allows you for some flexibility of the days where it's like, whoa, my day got so crazy, I didn't get to make the dinner that I had planned yesterday, or I didn't get a chance to do the workout that I wanted to do, whatever it is, right? So it allows for some of that flexibility in there. And again, like, it goes to that concept of, if we're doing it most of the time, we're going to be doing a pretty good job. The second thing is, I think it's helpful to, again, create that mindfulness in there of maybe taking some time to set an intention about what you're hoping for with your nutrition at the beginning of the week. I've been talking with my patients a lot about this idea of a start of the week check-in, where you take some time, maybe it's like Sunday morning or Saturday evening or Sunday evening, and just asking some questions about like, hey, what are my intentions for the week? How can I look out for myself? What boundaries could I set to help me be successful this week? Who can I reach out to for help? Is there anything that I can plan or prep to help me? So that can kind of set your intention to prioritize nutrition a little bit more, in whatever context that it is, right? So it just gives you the space to fully understand, like, hey, I have a week where I'm going to be able to invest a little bit more energy into nutrition. Let's take advantage of it. Hey, I'm going on vacation. I really want to enjoy these things, but I also want to feel good while I'm on vacation. So these are the priorities that I'm going to set. So it gives you just a space to reflect. And that's a huge part of nutrition change in the first place, is creating a good perspective around it.
Mm-hmm. And you've mentioned variety a couple times, variety amongst the different plant group categories, because I think a lot of people first think fruits and vegetables when they think plants, and then it's much broader than that. And then within each category, variety is important. So amongst vegetables, having the variety of vegetables, can you talk more about why the variety is important?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a ton of different reasons why variety is important, right? So I'll take the easy one of like fruits and vegetables, right? Like you mentioned, that's something that is often referenced as, hey, let's eat the rainbow of colors, right? And that's important because the colors that we visually see in our fruits and our vegetables are the antioxidants that go and fight inflammation. So the red that we find in our tomatoes is the lycopene. The blue in our blueberries is the anthocyanin. Like all of those colors that we see there are all different types of antioxidants that can help us. And our bodies need all different types of antioxidants. The same thing goes for our protein sources, our whole grains, our types of fats that we're incorporating. Proteins can come in all different shapes and forms. So like if we think about the classic dinner, a lot of times it's like, oh, we're having chicken or we're having salmon like every single day. I have patients that tell me, oh, it's so boring. I'm like, but there's so many different options to choose from. And we could be choosing things like all different types of beans, like lentils, black beans, chickpeas. We can incorporate soy into our diets. We can incorporate tempeh. We can incorporate different types of whole grains that have higher protein, like quinoa. There's all different options. And what's great about that is it gives us the opportunity to get all of the nutrients, right? So every type of food has its own profile of different vitamins and minerals and different types of fibers. And when you look at certain aspects of our health, like gut health in particular, one of the most important predictors of gut health is the different fibers that we're incorporating to help with the diversity in our gut. So if we can get all different types of nutrients from all different types of foods, we're setting ourselves up for success for fighting inflammation and fighting chronic disease overall, versus pigeonholing us into one particular nutrient that may not be giving us the broad need that our body wants.
Yeah, and I'm glad you're emphasizing variety, because I think people, again, default to fruits and vegetables, but when you look at just global statistics, how many lives are lost a year from people not getting enough whole grains, people not getting enough nuts and seeds. The variety amongst the different plant categories is really important and probably underemphasized, right? We think so much of what we shouldn't eat, like red meat, sugar sweetened beverages, as opposed to what are we not getting enough of, and the dramatic impact on mortality and our quality of life of not getting the variety is really worse from a statistical standpoint than what we're getting too much of. So kind of focusing on that variety is such an important part.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Proteins in particular, I think we get really narrow-minded about what goes into that protein category. So it's helpful to like when you're meal planning to have a list of all the different types of proteins that are available. And that can also help you with your meal planning too. So you can sit down and get all and think about all the different types of proteins with your list and be like, oh, okay, like I can stock up on some canned beans and some lentils. I can batch cook some lentils because I know I'm going to be super busy this week and they last a little bit longer in the fridge than maybe our chicken will. The canned beans are going to last in your pantry for forever, so it's helpful to have all those different sources so you can utilize them when they're convenient for you.
Yeah. And I'm glad you started mentioning tips because I think for a lot of people who may not be as familiar with making meals or just, again, are just trying to save time but still eat healthy, you mentioned batch cooking grains, which I think is great. Stocking pantry, what are some tips that you have for people to make their time in the kitchen efficient? And then I'm going to also ask you about how you go about recipe creation because how
Yeah.
do you get a meal on the table fast that's healthy?
Yeah. Well, I think I will say meal planning comes to first of mind. Like, I think that is a skill that is really, really important if you're looking for more efficiency and also to keep food waste down. I think meal planning comes to the first important thing. And that is how we're going to plan out our meals throughout the week and also create our grocery list so we have the things readily available, right? So sitting down, taking some time to kind of assess, hey, what is my week going to look like? What type of meals are going to serve me in the best way? Are we going to have a little bit more time to cook in the evenings, or would it be better to prep some things so I don't have decision anxiety or decision fatigue throughout the week at lunchtime because I'm super busy, So, and then you sit down and kind of assess, okay, what ingredients do I need in order to make these meals happen? That automatically is going to make it efficient because you're not going to come home after a busy day being like, oh my gosh, like what can I put together? That's going to happen for sure, but that meal planning can kind of help mitigate some of that. The second thing is like having some easy like pantry staples. I think it's totally okay to go for some convenience things that are already prepped or cooked for us. And that's what I love about like canned beans, because if you think about beans from scratch, like whether it's a black bean or a red bean or a white bean, like traditionally people think of that and they're like, oh my gosh, they take so long to cook. Although now with Instant Pots, it doesn't take that much longer to cook, but the canned beans are not that much more expensive in an easy way that they're already cooked. All you have to do is just drain and rinse them. It's an easy, viable, nutritious protein that you can add into a variety of different things like soups, grain bowls. You can mash them up and put them in between a quesadilla, like a wrap, a sandwich, all different types of things. I've also been really into like the pre-made grain packets too. So if you've seen in the grain aisle, there's a lot of these microwavable pouches of grains, and a lot of them are like quinoa or brown rice or wild rice blends. Those are killer. I've been using those like every day for lunch because you don't have to cook them and they're readily available and they're super high in fiber and great. So there's tons of different things that you can kind of pair together. I always say like keep a good stock of frozen vegetables, frozen fruit in the freezer. So you can pair a can of beans, you can pair your microwavable grains, you can put your frozen vegetables in there, put like a nice sauce or salad dressing on top of it, and there you go. You got a really tasty meal. So I think don't underestimate the fact that there are really awesome, nutritious convenience foods out there if you're looking for really efficient stuff. And in the meal planning kind of helps add into that of like, okay, making sure that you have all of those things readily available when you need it.
And how do you make those meals delicious? You mentioned you make a sauce, but I think most people make a sauce and it's not healthy in it. How do you keep it healthy and delicious?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think herbs and spices are wonderful. So like having a plethora of different herbs and spices, like cumin and chili powder and paprika, garlic powder and onion powder, like my favorite ones. They're my staples. I keep those around all the time. And you can add them into a variety of different things. Like if you're cooking your grains, add the spices in there to give it more flavor. Using some vegetable broth to cook different things in will automatically add extra flavor. Sauces are the best. And my favorite way to make sauces is with tahini, which if you never use tahini, it's a sesame-based paste, basically. It's kind of like if peanut butter and almond butter were a little bit thinner, but it's just made with sesame seeds, and it gives like a really nutty flavor to it. And I mix that with all types of things. So I make salad dressings with it. So that'll kind of be the fat base in a dressing, like a balsamic vinaigrette. Like if you put tahini with some vinegar and then diluted it with some water, awesome. You can pair it with hot sauce and make like a nice buffalo sauce. You can pair it with lemon juice. You can blend it with herbs. You can add your spices in there to make awesome different types of sauces. And there's tons of different things on the market out there that are generally healthy for sauces too. It depends. It also depends on serving size. Usually with something like that, you're not utilizing that much of it. It's just for flavor, right? So get creative. And we definitely delved a little bit into that in our cookbook too. So there's some fun options to kind of experiment for how to flavor through different sauces and salad dressings in our cookbook, which is great. But yeah, a lot of those things, it's just a little bit of experimentation and trying some different things. The easiest, I would say, is like lemon and lime juice. Like those are two easy things that you can keep in the fridge. Like chop it up, do a little wedge, squeeze it over your food, and it automatically gives that like fresh and bright flavor. So those are helpful fridge staples too.
Yeah, as you were describing some of the basics of making these healthy sauces, I was thinking about the cookbook. Can you tell me what made you want to write the cookbook?
Yeah, this is something that I can't even believe is happening. I love cookbooks. I have a whole collection. I have always been fascinated with them. My mom collects the Cooking Light magazines, and she has like the annual collections where they're all in one. And I just remember looking at them when I was a kid and just enjoying the photos with the recipe, going and cooking the recipe. Like I was super into the photography of it too. And when I started to pursue nutrition as a career, it was just kind of like an easy collection to start of, these are people that I really respect. I enjoy their recipes. They're tasty. And I also love the food photography and kind of like the branding process that people have with cookbooks as well. And so obviously when someone named Dr. Berquist came and asked me about starting a cookbook, I was like, yes, like I would absolutely love to. And we gelled so well with our passion with plant-based eating that it just made sense. And I think because I had been experimenting in the kitchen with so many different types of plant-based recipes in my own journey, it was only right to be able to share those with other people who wanted to take the same journey as we did. So it's definitely a dream come true.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure working with you on it. And when people start any venture like writing a cookbook, there's usually some burning desire to communicate a certain message. What has been the most important thing that you've wanted to communicate from writing this?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that I wanted to communicate is that plant-based eating is a lot easier than a lot of people think that it is. And what's great in our cookbook is that we give the option for easy, awesome, delicious recipes, but we also provide the information about why plant-based eating is really the best way to go when we're looking at chronic disease prevention, We go into detail about what types of foods that we should be incorporating every day. What types of foods are going to give us the energy that's long lasting and satiating and help us feel the best that we can. So it kind of is that dual message of, yes, like we can get all these awesome foods that are going to help us feel really great and help us live longer, but in an easy, healthy, delicious way.
Mm-hmm. And if there's one thing you wish that our listeners knew that we haven't had a chance to talk about, what would that be?
I feel like one of the things that I've been trying to advocate for, and we do this with our cookbook too, is that I feel like we subscribe to, okay, a breakfast is a breakfast, a lunch is a lunch, and a dinner is a dinner. And there's like this traditional idea about what those meals are supposed to look like. And I've been trying to convince more people to think outside the box of like, okay, you can do a breakfast for dinner. You could do a smoothie for lunchtime. You can do soup for breakfast. Like, think outside the box, because one, that creates a better satisfaction from your meal by trying something new and trying something new at a different time of day too. But also creates a little bit more convenience. Like if you have a batch cook of steel cut oats and it's already ready to go and you're having a busy lunchtime period, hey, why not? So I think that's one thing that I am encouraging everybody to kind of think about is thinking outside the box in what type of meal that you're having at the time of day that you're having. So creating some variety and in that scope as well.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. And for our listeners, I'm going to just put a plug in for our cookbook. It's going to be available April 12th. And Jenny, what are resources? What are good ways people can find you, learn more?
Sure. Yeah. The best way to find me, I am trying to be more active on my Instagram, and it's just at jbilko. And you'll see me post a lot about our cookbook, but also more factoids about nutrition, things that we've already mentioned in this podcast episode, about dietary structure, about meal balancing, just different nutrition facts to help you eat in the best way. So Instagram is definitely the best way to find me.
Awesome. Well, Jenny, thanks for all the work you do. I know our patients just absolutely love how you've helped them and how you've made a difference in their lives. And thank you for the amazing recipes and all the contribution to the cookbook.
Thank you so much, Dr. B. It's been such a pleasure working with you.